Something is wrong with British politics, and everyone knows it. Governments change, elections happen, policies are announced, and yet nothing really settles. Brexit happened, but borders remain porous. The state grows, but authority thins. Trust declines, but management expands. People argue endlessly about policy, culture, competence, or corruption, but the same failures repeat, regardless of who wins. My argument is simple but unsettling. We keep failing because we are answering the wrong first question. Modern politics begins by asking, what do you believe? What do you want? What policies do you support? All of these questions assume something prior. That political authority already exists and merely needs direction. But politics does not begin with preference. It begins with standing. The first question any political order must answer is this: who is entitled to govern, and by what right? Until that question is settled, no policy can claim legitimacy. Policy presupposes authority. It cannot create it. Some will say that authority is produced by ideas, constitutions, values, principles. They have it backward. Ideas become politically operative only once authority already exists. A state does not govern because it holds the correct beliefs. It governs because it is recognized as entitled to rule. Where authority is unclear or contested, ideology rushes in to fill the gap. Politics becomes a competition of moral claims, identities, or efficiencies, rather than an exercise of legitimate rule. The result is not self-government. It is administration, justified by preference or expertise. That is why authorship must be treated as prior to ideology. Beliefs matter, but only after the source of authority has been established and recognized. To explain this, I need to introduce a word that sounds abstract but names something very concrete: authorship. By authorship, I mean this: who has the right to author the law that binds everyone else? Every political system has an answer to that question, even when it pretends it doesn't. Authorship is not ideology. It is not policy. It is not voting. Authorship is standing. Voting is a mechanism. Authorship is the right that makes the mechanism meaningful. Without authorship, elections don't choose rulers. They choose managers. Here is the distinction that matters more than any other. A state can administer a population without authorship. A people can govern itself only with authorship. Administration can function indefinitely. Self-government cannot. When authorship is clear and recognized, authority can be limited, contested, and restrained. When authorship is unclear, power does not disappear. It becomes managerial. That is the condition Britain now finds itself in. Historically, Britain did not govern by abstract doctrine or popular sentiment alone. It governed through constitutional continuity, Parliament acting as the bearer of a historically continuous political people, the Crown as the symbol of legal personality, the common law as accumulated recognition, not invention. Authority flowed not from momentary consent, but from recognized continuity. A people did not reconstitute itself at every election. It endured, and Parliament governed in its name. This is not continental theory. It is Burkean, common law constitutionalism. Parliament, in this tradition, is not merely a law-making machine. It is the continuing bearer of a political people. Its authority does not come from inventing that people. It comes from governing in their name across time. That is why courts apply law but do not constitute the people. Elections express authorship but do not create it. And Parliament alone has standing to recognise the political subject it claims to represent. In the 20th century, this ordering was quietly reversed. Political authorship was fused with citizenship, residence, legal status, and administrative inclusion. The boundary of the political people was no longer recognized constitutionally. It became the routine output of policy. Immigration law, nationality law, registration rules. The electorate became administratively fluid. And something crucial happened. The body authorized to make law began to be continually reconstituted by the law it authorizes. At that point, sovereignty becomes circular. Parliamentary sovereignty answers what Parliament can do, not who it governs in the name of. Brexit restored something real. It restored external sovereignty over EU law, over trade, over borders, but it did not restore internal authorship. Parliament regained powers, but continued to govern an administratively shifting political subject. That is why policy drifted, why authority thinned, why legitimacy evaporated. Boris Johnson's failure can be summarized in one line: sovereignty without authorship. Power returned, standing did not. In this respect, something quietly familiar has happened. The British people have undergone a constitutional transformation similar to the one the Crown once did. Authority still operates in their name, just as law once operated in the name of the monarch. But the recognitional aspect has been thinned into abstraction. The Crown became a juridical title. The people have become an administratively defined category. Power continues, but authorship becomes symbolic rather than substantive. When authority is exercised in the name of a subject that no longer exists as a recognized political body, sovereignty persists in law but weakens in legitimacy. So Britain has become a substantive administration with a ceremonial monarch and a ceremonial people. A people cannot govern itself unless it can persist as the same people over time. Political authority is not exercised in a single moment. It is exercised across generations. Law binds the living. It draws on the dead. It claims the obedience of the unborn. Nationhood names this condition of persistence, but that persistence is sustained through recognition, not through constant reaffirmation of consent. A political people does not reconstitute itself at every election. It endures because it can be recognized as the same author of the law across time without continual mediation. A nation is not a population. A population is a collection of persons present at a moment. It can be counted, managed, and rearranged. A nation is a political community extended through time, defined by continuity of allegiance, institutional inheritance, and public recognition. Confusing the two turns self-government into management. The state ceases to govern in the name of a people, and instead governs a moving aggregate that it itself continually assembles. Belonging matters. Obligation matters. Service, shared institutions, and moral formation all matter, but they presuppose a people who can already be recognized as standing within a common inheritance. Renewal requires something that can be renewed. Where political membership becomes procedurally assembled, where allegiance is formalized, continuity managed, and belonging produced by policy, those same practices are asked to perform an impossible task. They are no longer renewing a people, they are substituting for one. At that point, authorship becomes administratively contingent. The political subject can no longer be recognized as a continuous author of the law without intervention. Continuity ceases to be assumed and must instead be maintained. This is not because renewal has failed, but because it has been made to operate beyond its limits. Political membership is not a reward for residence, contribution, or compliance. It is participation in a lineage of self-government. A nation may govern persons who do not belong to the political people. It may protect them under law. The rule of law does not require that all who are governed be authors. It requires that all who are governed be governed lawfully. A people that cannot bound itself cannot govern itself. Diversity creates real social and cultural pressures. That is obvious. Denying it is dishonest. But the decisive problem is not diversity itself. The decisive problem is the loss of a bounded political nation. When authorship dissolves into administration, cohesion must be purchased with money or enforced by power. Without restoring recognized authorship, no attempt to address those pressures can succeed, including radical measures like remigration. Why? Because policy without authorship is not self-government. It is management or coercion. A state can govern a plural population under law. It cannot govern indefinitely without a settled people. Demographic security is not recoverable through constitutional restoration alone. But constitutional restoration is the foundation without which any attempt to address demographic continuity must collapse into either coercion or permanent administration. Freedom is not the first principle of self-government. It is the result. Freedom becomes possible only when authority is recognized, authorship is bounded, and the political nation endures through time. Without that, liberty becomes either license tolerated by power or permission granted by administration. Neither is self-government. Freedom is not the absence of power. A free society does not lack power. It locates power correctly. Power exercised without recognized authority corrodes liberty, even when benign in intent. Power exercised through institutions that stand clearly in the name of a people can be limited, contested, and withdrawn. Law is not the enemy of liberty, it is its form. A free people recognizes law as its own restraint, not as an external imposition. This brings me to what I call the glorious restoration. Restoration does not mean returning to the past. It means restoring the conditions under which self-government is possible. It means Parliament once again acting as the recognizer of the political people, not merely the manager of a population. When I say Parliament must reassert political authorship, I do not mean symbolism, rhetoric, or cultural affirmation. I mean something very concrete. It means Parliament acting explicitly, in statute, to recognise and distinguish political authorship, who constitutes the governing people, and civil subjection, who lives under the law and is protected by it. Historically, these were not the same thing. British constitutional practice long distinguished between those who belonged to the political nation and those who were subjects of the crown. That distinction survived for centuries. It was erased only in the 20th century by statute, not necessity. What statute fused, statute can unfuse. Restoration therefore means Parliament legislating to stabilise the political people as a bounded subject, remove authorship from routine administrative processes, and treat the composition of the governing people as a constitutional matter, not a policy output. This is not government by decree. It is government by recognition. Some will say, why not just govern better? Why not reform the civil service, fix borders, enforce the law? Because without settled authorship, even good governance becomes circular. When the political subject is unstable, every election defines the sovereign, every policy alters its author, every crisis becomes a legitimacy crisis. That is why prosperity is used to buy compliance, why coercion is used to enforce order, why management replaces government. Force cannot substitute for authority. Might produces compulsion, not right. A population may obey power. Only a people can recognize authority. Where that chain of recognition breaks, enforcement replaces self-government. Order may persist. Legitimacy does not. Delay does not preserve neutrality. Delay chooses administrative drift. Once thresholds are crossed, restoration becomes impossible, and authority is left only with coercion or collapse. That is the moment Britain is approaching. Civil service reform matters. Border control matters. Policing matters. But without a settled account of authorship, even competent reform produces only better management. Britain does not lack expertise. It lacks standing. Until that is restored, every government will repeat the same pattern: assert sovereignty, win power, improvise policy, and slide back into managerial rule. This video is not a manifesto. It is not a party platform. It is an attempt to restore the order of political thought. Before Britain can argue again about borders, policing, or freedom, it must be able to answer a more basic question. Who governs Britain, and by what right? Until that question is answered constitutionally, every government will rule as a manager, every election will feel hollow, and every assertion of sovereignty will collapse back into administration. Authorship is not a slogan. It is the condition of self-government, and without it, nothing else endures.